the Nintendo Switch 2 has been released, and the most important question here is, should you buy one? So in this video, I'm gonna answer that. And not only that, I will also compare between the Switch 2 and the older versions of the Nintendo to be able to make it easier for you to decide which one you should get. So hello everybody, and welcome to Astrotech. Let's just start this video by talking what you get in the box. You get the Nintendo Switch 2 console, you get the Joy-Cons, you get the grip, you get the straps, and you get the dock, and you get also all the necessary cables. So in this video, I will mainly focus on the differences between the Nintendo Switch 2 and the older versions. And I've managed to think of 6 noticeable differences between the two. You have the display, the performance, the storage, the battery life, the speakers, and the kickstand. Let's just start by talking about the display. So with the Nintendo Switch 2, you get a 7.9-inch display screen compared to the 6.2 or 7-inch displays. You also get Full HD compared to the HD quality of the older versions. You also get here HDR, which does not exist on the older versions, which means better coloring to make it simple. And you have the refresh rate. So twice the refresh rate, 120 Hz here compared to the 60 Hz on the older versions. Now to be fair, the most noticeable difference is not all of those specs that I just listed. It's the display screen. So if you plan on gaming in handheld mode or in tabletop mode, then you would not get disappointed with the Switch 2. But if the screen size doesn't really matter to you, well then it does not matter whether you get the Nintendo Switch 2 or even go ahead and buy the older ones. So the second most noticeable difference is its performance. So you have improved processing and graphics. So you get smoother gameplay, sharper images, and faster loading times. But does this apply to all games? Well, actually, no, because Nintendo has divided its game library for the Nintendo Switch 2 into 3 categories. The first one is Nintendo Switch 2 games, which are fully optimized to take advantage of its performance. The second category is upgraded Nintendo Switch 1 games, such as The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now the third category are the entirety of Nintendo Switch's library, and these games are not upgraded, well, at least not right now. So this is quite important, because this means that you're paying $450 to play one new game at this moment, Mario Kart World. And that also means that all other games that are both enhanced and not enhanced, they're older games that you also can play on your Nintendo Switch, but is it worth the $450? So that's important to take into consideration. So the third most noticeable difference is the storage. So the Nintendo Switch has 32 gigabytes, the OLED has 64 gigabytes, and the Nintendo Switch 2 has 256 gigabytes, but you can only use 230 gigabytes of these. So this means that you can install 10 to 11 games on your Nintendo Switch 2. But all of these can also be expanded with micro SD cards. Now, the only issue here is that Nintendo Switch 2 can only be upgraded with microSD Express cards, and these are a lot more expensive than the regular microSD cards. But if 256 gigabytes are enough, well then, perfect. So the fourth most noticeable difference is the battery life. Now, when we compare the older versions with the Nintendo Switch 2, you have a larger capacity on the Nintendo Switch 2, but the runtime is also lower. So the Nintendo Switch 1 and OLED, you can use it in handheld mode or in tabletop mode for 4.5 to 9 hours. But the Nintendo Switch 2, you can use it from 2 to 6 hours. And the reason for that is that because of its improved processing and graphics, it consumes a lot more power, which directly translates to lower battery life. So the fifth most noticeable difference is the speakers. Nintendo Switch 2 has improved sound quality, crisper audio, and 3D spatial sound. Simply put, this means that you can hear sounds coming from different angles and directions. So if this is something you favor, then you won't be disappointed with the Nintendo Switch 2. The last most noticeable difference is the kickstand. The only reason I'm talking about this is because I want you to completely avoid the kickstand of the Nintendo Switch 1, especially if you plan on gaming in tabletop mode. The kickstand on the Nintendo Switch 2 and OLED versions are much more stable and much more durable. So these are the most noticeable differences with the Nintendo Switch 2 console. But what about the Nintendo Switch 2 dock? Is there any difference? Of course. So the older versions, you play in 1080p, capped out at 60 FPS, and with the newer version, you play in 4K resolution, capped out at 60 FPS. But the interesting part is that if you choose to lower your resolution to, for instance, let's say 1080p, well then you play in 120 Hz refresh rate. And that is exactly what you want when you're playing games that needs to be smooth, such as Mario Kart World. So the second difference with the Nintendo Switch 2 dock is that you get a cooling fan that cools down your Nintendo Switch 2 console when you're playing your demanding games in 4K resolution, which is also great. So another difference that the Nintendo Switch 2 has is its Joy-Cons. So they are bigger in size, even the buttons are a little bit different, so they're more comfortable, and you have a travel distance with thumbsticks that feels much more natural. You also have the triggers, which are larger, and not only that, the most interesting part is not the buttons. It's the way you connect the Joy-Con to the console. Instead of rail mechanism, we now have magnets. With a simple press of a button at the back, I can remove my Joy-Con from the console, and I can attach it once again just by taking it close to the console. So easy and very sturdy. I mean, even if I try to let it go, it won't. So great job, Nintendo. See, not only the buttons are bigger at the front and in the triggers, but also the SL and SR buttons are bigger. And that is great because a lot of people maybe have larger hands, and now this won't be a problem since the buttons are also larger here at the top. So the last thing I want to mention is the Joy-Con straps. Now, there's some difference between these and the older versions, but the most interesting part about these is that if you have a flat surface, well then you can transform your Joy-Con controller into a mouse controller. So in supported games, you'll be able to use your Joy-Con as a mouse. So these are the most noticeable differences between the Nintendo Switch 2 and the older versions that will impact your decision whether you should buy one, wait for it, or get an older version. So what are the differences? Well, I've made a table once again to be able to simplify everything that I've talked about in this video. So this is the end of the video. Hopefully it was helpful for you in your decision-making process. So if you liked it, please push that like button, subscribe, and push that notification button for upcoming content. And in the comment section below, write down whether you're gonna buy it, whether you're gonna wait, or go ahead and purchase the older versions. If there's something else you want me to cover here on this channel, we'll also write down in the comment section below. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one.